right, guys, we're gonna wait for Tamika to join us. Let's see. Okay. Thank you guys all for being here. Here we go. Here's Tamika. Just hold on. Hi, Tamika.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm starstruck.
Oh my God, I feel that way. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry that behind me there's the TV is on, but I have to watch the protest, and also there I've been doing media all day about the service that happened, the memorial service for George Floyd. So I'm
You
just
were there.
paying attention to both things. I'm sorry.
You were there, right?
I did not go. I did
Okay.
not go. I have been on the ground working for a week dealing with multiple cases,
Mhm.
and I'm tired. And so I knew that today would be a whole thing. You know much more than me about celebrities and the push and pull and getting a seat and all of that. And I said, I'll stay home and watch it on TV. I've already done what I could do to this at this point, and so I figure I can come home and take a rest. So I'm in New York.
I mean, you're not really resting. I've seen that you've been doing like tons of lives and stuff. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate you being here on this one. So I want to jump right in because I know that your time is valuable and like you've been really busy and everything. So I actually, the first that I learned about you was from your speech in Minneapolis, which was so incredible, and I reposted it. But I did a little bit more research on you and found out that you've been an activist really since you were a kid. And that you were one of the 4 women who organized the Women's March, which
Okay.
by counts was like one of the biggest marches or the biggest march in US history.
Yep. That's
So I
true.
want to hear about how you got started as an activist and about your organization Until Freedom.
So my parents are lifelong activists, and I think when you grow up in the community that I came from, which is the projects in Harlem, housing development in Harlem, there's a few ways you can go. Of course, you can be a working family that sort of stays to yourself and takes care of your kids and stays out the way. You could also be a part of the community that is struggling, really struggling with a lot of different ills in the home. And or you could be a family like me, which was the family that wanted to see better for the community. So they were very engaged. And when I was young, I thought it was a damn curse. It
Mm.
was like, why do I have to go to rallies? My friends are going skating. They're taking me to rallies, different things that I just didn't think kids should be doing. And I really didn't understand it at all. I was very frustrated. And so by the time I was about 13 or 14, I became a runaway. I started running away from home to rebel from feeling like I wasn't having a normal childhood. And so by the time I was 17, I got pregnant with my son. My son is now 21 years old.
Amazing.
And I, his father was shot and killed 2 years later. So that's sort of where it all begins. Because at the point that his father was murdered, I realized that, oh, shoot, like we've got problems. Like there's some things going on in society that we really need to focus on. And I think for me, um, what came up was my parents had been taking me to rallies about police brutality, education, community development, and all this stuff. And it came together. Like I realized when he died that all of that was a part of his situation because he, even though he had a very good family, His mom was a perpetual drug abuser. His father was in and out of prison. So he dealt with some real serious life challenges. And in the end, you know, he wasn't able to survive. And some people do, but it's the exception and not the rule. So I was like, oh, this is why I'm supposed to be in this work. And this is what my parents have been trying to teach me. So maybe I should actually invest in it. And at that point, I became like a leader in my own right. I wanted to go to the rallies. I wanted to be involved. And I started to do youth organizing. That's where it began. I was like in the movement. I was working as a youth leader, and then I became an assistant, and I kind of grew in the ranks of civil rights work. And then I just started leading on my own campaigns, organizing. And because of the gun violence issue, I feel like that was where my passion came in. Like, that's where I really wanted to do work. So I got with a group of people and we created something in New York City called the Crisis Management System. And that is, sorry for the noise, but there's people around, sorry. So
I just can hear you. It's perfect.
yeah. So I created the crisis management system along with another group. And at the time in New York City, there was a lot of violence. It was sort of like Chicago, what we see happening there, unfortunately. And I mean, we were having 30 and 40 shootings on Memorial Weekend, like in one weekend, in one park. And so we decided that one of the things that had to happen is the people organizing didn't look like the folks who were having the problems, right? Like, it didn't look like the community that they were trying to serve. So they had people that looked like you and me trying to go talk to young people and other individuals who've been through like real hard life circumstances. And that doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. You have to pair people with folks that understand their challenges and understand their lives. And so in order to do that, you got to pay those people because they got to be able to eat. They need their rent paid. So we fought with the city and got the first $5 million. And that money was dedicated to grassroots organizers, people who are formerly incarcerated, people who have been through the struggle. We got them paid at that rate. And then, and so that I was very proud of that at $5 million. And now today, we've actually been able to get the city, excuse me, I'm doing a live. Sorry. We've actually been able to get the city to invest $38 million to the groups in New York that do anti-violence work. Wow. So for me, while I'm doing a lot of criminal justice, activity, and I'm out there with that, my work around trying to keep our communities safe and trying to provide young people with alternatives to violence, giving them jobs, giving them mental health support, supporting their families. That to me is where I feel like, they always say, when you die, what do you want to be known for? And that's it.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I actually didn't know about that organization, that you were part of that and one of the main people. So that's super interesting. So I want to kind of bring us up to present day and what you've been doing around Black Lives Matter and with freedom and like this specific police brutality and systemic racism within the police system.
So I left my house on Memorial Day, traveling to Louisville, Kentucky to stand for a young woman by the name of Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was in her home with her partner at, I guess it was 12:30 at night. She was sleeping and there was a knock at the door. They got up, they started calling out, who is it? Who is it? Who is it? No one answered. And her boyfriend, Kenny Walker, fired one warning shot, which is actually, that's legal in Louisville, in Kentucky. And the police, who were executing a no-knock warrant, which means they don't have to announce themselves, for a person who had not been in the home for 3 years, and the person was already in police custody at that time. They shot through windows, doors from the outside and killed Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old EMT worker. She was killed in her home. They arrested Kenny Walker, kept him in jail for, I guess it was 3 weeks, which he says felt like 3 months. Took away his rights because he fired the warning shot. And we went there to say, one, when Black women, and by the way, we're there Memorial Day, and this happened on March 13th. So it's been 2 months at this point. Police haven't been fired. Still to today, they haven't been fired. They're on administrative leave, which means a vacation to wait and see if the movement dies down and people forget about it. And then they can either come back to work and they can receive a raise and a promotion, or they can go apply for jobs in neighboring police departments. So they can go to other cities and apply and go to work for them. And we know that because in Ferguson, where Mike Brown was killed, the police officer there had been working in different police departments in that region. So that happens all the time. And we went there and said, women do not get enough attention. Somebody needs to raise hell for Breonna Taylor. She's the perfect person. Some people don't like to get involved because, I'm nervous, they had a gun, or they have a bad record, or, they've been in jail before. We have all these reasons why we don't feel that everyone should receive justice. But in Breonna's case, she had no criminal background. There was nothing illegal found in her home. She was sleeping to prepare for work the next day. She was an essential worker on the front lines, right, during COVID, and she was killed, and no one has been held accountable for it. So I left my home on Memorial Day, going there to support Breonna Taylor's family. We held 2 rallies. The community was already, people were starting to come to an understanding about what happened. But because we have the resources and the attention, we brought a lot of light to Breonna Taylor's family and organized for them. We left there and we traveled to Indianapolis. When we got to Indiana, we were going to visit one of 3 families that had police murder. So there was a person in 3 families murdered in a 24-hour period, of which one was a pregnant woman that a cop ran over. And so we went to Indianapolis because it was so close in distance that we would be able to visit with a family there. So we visited with the family of Mikkel Rose. While we were on the way, we heard and saw the images of George Floyd, which I can't describe to you the tears we shed on that ride, the just yelling out. We couldn't believe it. I mean, I couldn't even really watch it, but I could hear, as others in the vehicle were watching, him calling for his mother and his family members. Oh. And it's completely traumatizing. So we said, you know what? We're driving 10 hours overnight to Minneapolis, and we're going to be there. By the time we got there, it was already, people were pissed off. And so we showed up, and we did a live while we were driving. And people, they were like, we want to be down, and we can't be there, so we're happy you're going, so we're going to donate. We're sending you $20, $50, $100, whatever we have. And they helped us while we were on the road. So by the time we got there, we had raised a little bit of money, and we just jumped in and started donating to local organizations, helping the local bail fund so people could get out of jail, and just supporting in any way that we could. And the crazy part is that when we arrived, the police department was using taxpayer dollars to build a wall around the precinct to protect themselves. And we're thinking, wow, like, you killed George Floyd. These people are angry because of you. So maybe if you approach it from a humble, we apologize, we're trying to fix this perspective, then people could like chill out. But instead, the way in which you approach it with a militarized police force response, it's only going to heighten tension. So while we were there, we experienced rubber bullets, And it's all on my Facebook page. You can watch the videos. Like, it was live and in color. One of my partners was pepper spray. They used pepper spray to disperse the crowds. They did a lot. It was a lot that happened. Smoke bombs, a lot that happened. And of course, there was also the return of some of similar activity when they threw tear gas cans out. People would pick the cans up and throw it back at the police officers. It was mayhem. And I again say, why not just have a humble attitude, since you know that these people are angry because of something that happened and there was no accountability and days were beginning to pass by. So that's where we went. And once we got on the ground, we stayed. We said we were going home in one day. We ended up being there about 4 or 5 days because things were happening every day and people were really mobilized. Folks came from all over the world to support that community. And then we came back home, and then there was a big rally in Houston, Texas this week, which is where George Floyd is actually from. 70,000 people marched just 2 days ago for him there. And so yesterday, to see to hear Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, stand there and say it was wrong, people need to be held accountable, and that he was going to increase the charges against Chauvin, where the city was trying to give him a real low level charge, and that they were going to charge the other 3 officers, arrest and charge them. It felt good. It's not a win, but it's a small victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yesterday a lot of people texted me really happy and excited, like, look, there's progress, something's happened. But I think just even your past week is such a good example of how much larger this is than just a couple bad cops.
Right.
And one of the things that I felt really frustrated by is people being like, well, it's a couple bad apples, police in general, we need them, whatever. And they don't understand the history of policing in this country and why I guess I want to hear from you about why to kind of take apart the myth of the good cop versus the bad cop.
Yeah. So it's not a cop situation. It's not an individual. While yes, they should be held accountable when they commit crimes, it's not about individual cops. I study the Kenyan nonviolence tradition, which is Dr. King's ideology. And one of the principles says, attack the forces of evil and not people doing evil. And the reason why that's important is because we'll be fighting with evil people all day long. The issue is the system. The system does not work for Black people in America. And the system is not designed to hold people accountable for the loss of life for Black folks. And so when you are trying to figure out how to attack the problem, you have to be thinking about systematic changes. And you have to think about systemic racism. You have to think about what white supremacy means when it exists within institutions. And you could get an arrest, you can get people charged because the state feels the pressure to do that. But then when those individuals get to court, we could have the same problem with racism bearing its head, with a system not working for us, with people literally having hatred for our communities, and therefore nothing happens. There's no conviction. So you go through all of this, and you're protesting, you're up all night, you're putting your body on the line, you get people arrested and charged, they spend a few hours in jail, and then when it all comes down to it, you can't actually seal the deal and ensure that they are held accountable. And that is what we mean when we say this is not about an individual cop. It's an entire system. And protesters and when we chant, we like to say the whole damn system is guilty as hell. And that's real.
Yeah, because they're also protecting and allowing for bad cops, quote unquote, to get away with behaviors, which is like a problem. Like, I actually was at a rally the day before yesterday, and the cops were like kneeling and doing stuff, and it's like, well, if you really are a good cop, then quit your job, because you work in a organization that is inherently racist. And even historically, the history of policing in this country, the police force was created after the slaves were freed to protect white people and white property. And a lot of people don't realize that. So they've just understood the police as like something that is a part of our society and has to exist without understanding the racist history.
Right. Like so the system was designed right after slavery, as you said, to deal with uh it was like wayward people. So they because remember, not everyone knew we were free. So there were parts of the country where folks were free and it was never an announcement made. So they were still slaves and or still enslaved. And the police was designed to deal with all of that, to protect the white man's property, to keep people in line, to to keep order, law and order. We hear that a lot. To keep law and order. And so therefore, as you said, the system, policing in general, is inherently racist. And it's something that we can't address by talking about good cops, bad cops. People say, well, the person that shot so-and-so was Asian or white or this or whatever. It's not a white, it's not a black, it's not an Asian, it's a blue problem. It's the color blue. There is a blue wall of silence that is up where the cops are on one side and the people are on the other. So it's good to see people come out and kneel, police officers to stand with folks, to know that, because I know of many cops. I have cops in my family who are really good people, but they have to work on dismantling the system from within. They have to work on calling it out and being willing to stand up and speak out, no matter how difficult it is, to say, this, what's happening here is not right. And it's not going to happen on my watch. And that's why those other 3 cops are in trouble right now, because they were complicit. They were engaged. They should have said, you have to get off of him. And if necessary, they should have pulled their gun out on him and said, get up right now. And they didn't do that. They helped. Yeah, they helped to kill George Floyd.
Like, why aren't you? That was the hardest part of watching. I mean, there were so many hard parts, but you're like watching something unfold, what feels like real time, and you're like, do something, and no doing anything. So that makes me think about, I'm posting defund the police hashtags, and I've been getting a lot of responses of angry people being like, well, what?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. How does your audience respond to your being in this movement? Like, how do they feel about it?
It's really complicated. I think that I have a lot of ag dudes in my mentions all the time. They're probably here right now, up everyone. And then I have
the dudes.
Yeah, and I have people from the kind of moderate left who are like, yeah, I can agree that racism is bad, but like, defund the police, like, no, let's reform the police. And it's like, that's part of the reason I wanted you to be here, was to say, like, there's a reason that we say defund the police and not reform the police.
That's right. You know what? Reform. I'm starting to change my language, because I used to say, and someone just checked me about it the other day, I used to say donate. Now I'm saying invest. Someone told me invest, because we can't fight the system and work for it at the same time. People want us to be able to speak, and people love the speech that I made, which was not planned. It was just what came from my heart. As you can see, I had no paper. I had nothing. I just said what I know to be true.
Yeah.
I can't do that if I work for somebody and I have to figure out when I go back, are they going to be upset? I have to be independent from all of that. So that's why we ask for donations. And you know what? I forgot to put in this thing, our organization's website.
Yeah. And I'll be until freedom after this too and stuff.
Yeah.
That made me think about a couple things that you just said, but one of the things that I loved in your speech is you said, where was AutoZone when Philando Castile was shot? I think that was so powerful. And I think that, with all this conversation around looting, like, we live in a country that has traditionally valued corporations over human life.
Over human bodies. That's
so
right.
I want to hear like why you said that specifically, and like hear you talk about that a little bit more.
Well, because I can tell, and that was early on. Remember, the real vandalism came a little bit later. It was like days of craziness, but I could see what was happening in the media. The narrative was being shifted away from the original violence that took place, that created all of this attention. People weren't looting days before George Floyd was killed. Okay, people were in their homes because they had COVID-19 scares. So let's be clear. folks came out their homes because of what happened to George Floyd, the violence that happened there. And so, you know, I was basically just saying, because I could see they were like, oh, vandalism is not right, and this and that. And of course, we're not pushing. We don't want people to burn. I don't think we need to throw one brick. I think we need to be unified, black, white, brown, and red. If we come together and we vote together and we stand together, we speak in one clear voice, we can make a change without having to burn one thing down, because people care about money and votes and organization. But those people, it was happening, and you could see that the media was beginning to focus on that. And they were starting to ask me in every interview, well, what about, no, don't ask me that. We
Even
can figure
before,
that out.
yeah.
Right. Arrest the cops.
Grabbing onto that. Yeah.
Right. Arrest the cops. And then we'll ask people to calm down and let's go to the next phase of this fight. But don't ask me that while these police officers are in their homes after they murdered a man. Don't ask me that. So what I'm saying about the corporations, and Target actually responded, because first, before I said AutoZone, I talked about Target. And surely Target put out a statement saying that they were going to prepare truckloads of supplies and take the supplies around to places where protests are happening to help people. They acknowledged it. Marc Jacobs put out a statement saying, don't let anybody tell you that property and buildings are more important than lives. So people responded. But my position with AutoZone is, hey, you're in the car business, right? You're in the car business. Philando Castile was a registered, licensed, carrying gun owner, and he was shot and killed for no damn reason at all, on camera in front of a little girl who will forever be traumatized, and the rest of us that watched that tape. Where the hell was AutoZone? Why didn't they say, this requires our attention, we need to speak up? They didn't. So don't ask me to care about AutoZone's building, not their employees, not the CEO, but their building, when people are trying to figure out what happened to George Floyd.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think about how much power in this culture corporations like that have. And if they put themselves in a real way, not in a like just surface level, whatever, but in a real way, they, you know, align themselves with defund the police and the demands of Black Lives Matter. And until that would be really powerful.
That's right. I mean, that's what I think. I think we've seen it work. Ben and Jerry's is an example. Ben and Jerry's goes hard for the Black Lives Matter movement, for women's issues. They donate, they stand with us. And even when there's scandal, because we've been through, since we planned the largest mass mobilization in American history, it came with a lot of attacks. We went through hell, you know, and that's just the way it is. And now we know. At the time when we were going through it, it didn't feel good. But now that we're a little bit wiser and we've been through more, we understand that it goes along with the territory. And Ben and Jerry's and a few other individuals said, we're going to continue to stick with you. When people ran, people stopped donating, people didn't want to work. But Ben and Jerry stayed, as we say, 10 toes down, working with us. And so they would be a company that I would tell other corporations to look at the way in which they operate and how they are very committed to the movement. I saw some tweets from them today. It's copied on someone else's page. I don't know exactly what, I'm not going to repeat them because I'm not sure that they said it, but people should go check it out, because if they did say it, it was some good stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, I knew a little bit about Ben and Jerry's, but not that. I'm looking at my questions for you because I wanted to organize myself so you could really have.
Unfortunately, everything is crammed together, so I have to go in like the next few minutes. But please go ahead.
Let me ask you just two more questions then. What would you like to see more of surrounding the BLM protests and activism? What would you like to see less of?
I'd like to see more allyship. I'd like to see us marching, not just on the streets, but also marching to register to vote, marching to fill out the census, marching to go and vote. So I want us to be more politically engaged. I want us to have more opportunities to learn, sort of like to teach in, if you will, at the protest. And I'd like to see less of white folks censoring themselves to the point that they cause disruption within the march. We need you to be there. We want white folks to come and be a part of it. And in fact, we can't dismantle white supremacy because we didn't create it. We have to dismantle it together, right? We have to dismantle it together. And so we need white people to be a part of the movement. But sometimes white folks show up with conditions. They show up wanting to be in control. They show up more angry than me. And so I can't even, I'm the one impacted, and they're speaking more, censoring themselves, and also doing things like, you know, vandalism at times when, okay, the cameras are here now, so it's cool and we're all going to go home or get arrested and get out overnight. But the next day when the cameras are gone, these police officers are going to go into our communities and terrorize us when they won't be in your community. And so I want white folks to learn more about what it means to be a good ally or to be a good accomplice, because that's really what we need, so that as we are operating in these spaces together, we're benefiting one another, and that white people are benefiting the movement in ways that we need, and not just the way in which you think it should be done.
Yeah, I think that there's so much shame around race in the country for everyone.
Yeah.
And people take that shame and address it face on instead of being fragile.
Right.
What I love and recommend is white fragility. People should order it.
Right. Yep.
I want to know how, I mean, I think you've said it, but I think it's really important that people take that shame and that fragility and put it towards something productive and actionable.
Yeah. I mean, get in and speak honestly. So, you know, it doesn't always feel comfortable to say I need white people to do X, Y, Z, but we're in a real fight. This is a serious fight. And so if we're going to work together, we've got to be honest. We've got to be straightforward, and we have to provide people space to learn. And we have to provide people space to be honest with us when we're not behaving in a way that's actually helpful to the movement. So I think that, you know, everyone who's here with us today on your live, and people who are tuning into this struggle and sort of just coming into it saying, I've got to do something, know that you're needed, know that you need patience to come into this movement, because you have people who are broken, people who are hurting, who may not always respond in the ways in which you would like. But we have to be in this together. This is a humanitarian issue. This is not a white issue or a black issue alone. It's not a black parade. It's not a black issue. This has become a human issue, and we're getting there, because they didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to do a thing. They were going to let these cops get away with murder. But you know what? They couldn't, because they have a black commissioner who knew, a black chief who knew what he had to do in terms of firing them, and the people pushed for them. They wanted to try one and see if they could get away with it, and we said hell no, has to be all four. So that's what protests mean. And I think as long as we stick in this thing together, and we do things like having conversations with people who don't even know each other, we can actually create the world that we all want to live in, where we don't have to march because Black lives aren't respected. There's a lot of other issues. We've got climate change we need to deal with, that all of us are dealing with. We've got poverty. We've got education issues. We shouldn't be worrying about police killing Black people on our streets.
That was so powerful and so well said.
Thank you
so much for being here, Tamika, and I'm just so happy to watch what you're doing and all the work you do, and thank you for everything you're doing.
I appreciate you so much for having me. I am so fangirling.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you for allowing me to be.
I'm fangirling. I would.
You are absolutely beautiful.
Oh, same to you. I mean, like, so beautiful in every moment.
You too.
Like, my God, this girl. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.